Unlock some design skills today. We're diving into Inkscape. You know that free design tool you've been wanting to learn more about? We're going to be checking out this blog post by Nubian Reese.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they're a designer, and they not only share their personal Inkscape journey in this post, but they also give this super helpful breakdown of how to convert SVG to PNG, which is something you got to know,
Yeah.
if you're even thinking about doing client work or selling designs online. Oh, and Nubian's post is from December 18th, 2024, so it's super recent. What I really love about Nubian's story is that they capture that initial excitement of discovering Inkscape, like when you find something awesome and it's totally free.
It's so great that tools like Inkscape are making design more accessible. Not everyone can afford expensive software. So having powerful tools available for free opens up so many possibilities for so many people.
I totally agree. And Nubian really emphasizes that. They said at first they felt a little overwhelmed,
Right.
which makes sense.
Yeah, new software can be scary.
For sure. But they said they quickly found their way around the interface and were impressed by how much Inkscape can do.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. A lot of folks feel that initial wave of where do I even start? But then you discover how intuitive it actually is.
It's so encouraging to hear that. Nubian especially raved about the flexibility of Inkscape. They talked about creating everything, from detailed vector graphics for logos to playing around with different typography styles. Now, I gotta admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around vector graphics. Can you break down what makes them so special and why a designer would choose them over other image types?
Okay, so imagine you're designing a logo for a new coffee shop, and you create this amazing design in Inkscape using vector graphics. You can then resize that logo to fit on a tiny business card, or blow it up to cover an entire storefront window, and it'll still look perfectly sharp and crisp. That's because vector graphics aren't made up of pixels like a photograph. They're based on mathematical formulas, so they retain their quality no matter how much you scale them.
That's so impressive. So if I'm getting this right, vector graphics are the way to go for logos, icons, illustrations, anything that needs to be resized without losing quality.
Exactly.
That makes total sense. Now, I know Nubian had a positive experience overall, but they did mention hitting some bumps in the road, some moments of frustration as they were learning. Do you think those challenges are just part of the process?
Oh, absolutely. Every new skill has a learning curve, and ton software is no different. But honestly, those moments of frustration are often where the real learning happens, when we hit a roadblock and have to figure out how to overcome it. That's when we truly start to understand the ins and outs of a program.
It's like those brain-stretching moments
Yeah.
that make you feel like you're actually making progress.
For sure. And think about the feeling of accomplishment. When you finally solve that problem or master that new technique, it makes it all worthwhile.
Totally. You know what else is great about Inkscape? Nubian mentioned this. There's a huge online community of Inkscape users
So,
who are incredibly helpful and supportive.
absolutely. That's one of the best things about open source software like Inkscape. There's this real sense of community. People are always willing to share tips, tutorials, and encouragement. You can find answers to almost any question you have, and you never feel like you're going through it alone.
It's like having this built-in support system of design buddies cheering you on. Okay, so we've talked about Nubian's initial experience with Inkscape, the power of vector graphics, and the amazing community surrounding this tool. Now let's get into why this SVG to PNG conversion is so important. I know this is going to be super helpful for me as I start thinking about creating designs I can actually share or even sell.
Yeah, SVGs are fantastic for creating and editing your designs, but they're not always the ideal format for sharing or using in different applications. That's where PNGs come in.
Can you give us a real-world example of when someone might need to convert an SVG to a PNG?
Sure, let's say you've designed a logo for a client in Inkscape using an SVG format. That's great for keeping the design flexible and high quality, but when it comes to putting that logo on their website, you'll likely need it in a PNG format. PNGs are widely compatible with web browsers and other graphic design programs, which makes them perfect for sharing and using across different platforms.
That's a great point. I've definitely run into compatibility issues before when trying to share designs. So SVG is our workhorse format for creating and editing, and PNG is our sharing-friendly format.
Exactly. Think of SVG as your behind-the-scenes design file, and PNG as the polished, presentation-ready version.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, I'm super curious about the actual steps involved in this SVG to PNG conversion. Nubian outlined a really clear process in their blog post. I'm ready to take notes.
All right, let's dive into those steps, and I'll throw in some extra tips along the way.
Sounds good. What's the first move when you want to convert an SVG file to a PNG in Inkscape?
Well, it all starts with making sure your SVG file is prepped and ready. Open up your design in Inkscape and take a final look. Imagine you're an art director, giving your masterpiece one last review before it goes out into the world. Are all the colors perfect? Is the text exactly how you want it? Are there any stray elements that need tidying up? Once you convert to PNG, making changes becomes a bit more complicated, so it's always best to finalize your design in the SVG format before moving on to the conversion.
That's great advice. I've definitely been guilty of rushing to export before double-checking everything. So step one is to open the SVG file in Inkscape and give it that final, meticulous review. What's next?
Let's talk page size. Go up to the File menu and click on Document Properties. This opens up a window that gives you control over various aspects of your document, including the page size. You want to make sure the page size fits your design perfectly, like a custom-made frame for your artwork.
Why is it so important to have the page size just right? Does it really affect the final PNG?
It does. Imagine you've designed this beautiful logo, but your page size is set way bigger than the actual artwork. When you export it as a PNG, you'll end up with a lot of unnecessary blank space around your logo. It not only looks unprofessional, but it can also create larger file sizes, which can slow down website loading times, or make it harder to share your design online. So by adjusting the page size to fit your design snugly, you're ensuring that your PNG file is both visually appealing and optimized for sharing.
Wow, I never realized the page size could have such a big impact.
Okay, so we've opened our SVG, given it a final check, and adjusted the page size. What's the next step in this magical PNG transformation?
This is where the magic happens. Exporting your design. Inkscape makes it super easy. You can either use the shortcut Shift plus C for Alt plus E, or go up to the File menu and select Export PNG Image. Either way, you'll see the export panel pop up on the right side of your screen. And this is where we'll make some key decisions about our PNG file.
I'm already feeling like a tech wizard. Okay, we've hit export and the export panel is open. What kind of choices do we get to make here? First, you get to decide exactly which part of your design you want to include in the PNG. See those export area options. You have three choices: page, drawing, or selection.
Okay.
Let's break those down.
I'm all ears.
Page will export everything within the boundaries of your defined page size. So if you want to include the entire canvas, including any background elements or blank space, you would choose page. Drawing focuses solely on the objects you've created in your design. It excludes any background elements or blank space, giving you a clean, focused PNG of your artwork. Finally, selection allows you to export only the specific objects you've selected in your design. So if you only want a PNG of a certain element or portion of your artwork, you can select it and choose selection.
That's so cool. It's like having 3 different export buttons, each with its own special power. This level of control is amazing. Okay, so we've chosen our export area. What's next on the PNG agenda?
Now let's talk about DPI, or dots per inch. DPI is all about image resolution, and it plays a crucial role in how sharp and detailed your PNG will look, especially if you're planning to print it.
I've definitely heard the term DPI before, but honestly, I'm a bit fuzzy on what it actually means. Can you give us a simple breakdown?
Absolutely. Imagine you're looking at a printed photo up close. You'll notice it's made up of tons of tiny dots. The more dots packed into each inch, the sharper and more detailed the image appears. That's essentially what DPI measures, the density of those dots.
Okay, that makes sense. So a higher DPI means a sharper image.
Exactly. When you're exporting your PNG, you'll need to decide what DPI setting is best for your needs. If you're planning to print your design on something like a t-shirt or a poster, you'll want to choose a high DPI like 300 to ensure it looks crisp and clear when printed. But if you're mainly using your PNG for websites or online sharing, a lower DPI like 72 is usually fine, as screen resolutions are generally lower than print resolutions.
That's a great point. So choosing the right DPI depends on how we plan to use our PNG. Okay, so we've picked our export area, set our DPI, and now we're almost ready to unleash our PNG into the world. What's the final step before we hit that export button?
Before you send your PNG out into the digital universe, you'll need to choose a location on your computer where you want to save it. You can create a special folder for your PNG files, or save it wherever it's easiest for you to find later. And don't forget to give your file a catchy and descriptive name so you can easily identify it later. It's like giving your digital creation a name tag, so it doesn't get lost in the sea of files in your computer.
That's so smart. I'm definitely guilty of saving files with generic names and then spending ages searching for them later. Okay, we've reached the moment of truth. We've prepped our design, adjusted the page size, chosen our export settings, named our file, and selected our save location. Are we finally ready to hit that export button and witness the PNG magic?
You are. Click that export button and watch as Inkscape transforms your SVG file into a shiny new PNG. It's like watching your design graduate from the editing stage to the ready-to-share stage.
And from there, the possibilities are endless. We can share a PNG on social media, use it in website designs, incorporate it into printed materials. The world is our oyster.
You got it. Creating a PNG opens up a world of opportunities for sharing and using your design in different ways. It's a key step in taking your Inkscape skills to the next level.
This is so empowering. I love how Inkscape gives us the tools to create amazing designs and then easily convert them into a format we can share with the world. Okay, so we've covered the step-by-step process of converting SVG to PNG. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the amazing Inkscape community. Nubian's blog post really highlighted the supportive nature of this community, and I'm curious to learn more about what makes it so special.
I'm happy to dive into that. The Inkscape community is a remarkable example of how open source software can bring people together and foster a spirit of collaboration and shared learning.
Tell me more.
It's truly a special community. Imagine like a global network of designers, artists, and enthusiasts,
Yeah.
all connected by this shared passion for Inkscape.
That's so cool. What are some of the ways people connect and collaborate within the community?
Well, there are tons of online forums dedicated to Inkscape, where people can post questions, get feedback on their work, or just chat about design in general. And then there are all these amazing tutorials and resources created by experienced users. You can find everything from basic getting started guides to in-depth tutorials on advanced techniques, all freely available online.
Wow, it's like having this never-ending design masterclass taught by a global team of passionate volunteers. It really embodies that idea of knowledge sharing and collaborative learning.
Exactly. And because it's open source, there's this real sense of ownership and community involvement. Users can actually contribute to the development of Inkscape by reporting bugs, suggesting new features, or even coding improvements themselves.
That's incredible. So it's not just a software, it's this collaborative project that's constantly being shaped and improved by the people who use it.
Precisely. And that's one of the things that makes Inkscape so unique. It's a tool created by the people for the people.
You know, this conversation is making me think back to Nubian's story. They were drawn to Inkscape because it was free and easy to use, but it seems like they stayed for the community.
I think that's true for a lot of Inkscape users. The software itself is fantastic, but the community is what makes it really special.
I'm starting to see why. It's more than just a piece of software. It's like a movement, a way of thinking about design and collaboration.
I love that. It really captures the essence of what Inkscape is all about.
Okay, so we've explored the world of the Inkscape community, and I have to say I'm feeling inspired. Now, before we move on, I want to make sure we've covered all the bases when it comes to understanding vector graphics. We talked about how they're great for scaling and resizing. But are there any downsides to using vector graphics? Like, are there situations where a different type of image might be a better choice?
That's a good question. While vector graphics are super versatile, there are a few things to keep in mind. Vector graphics are best for images with clean lines and solid colors, like logos, icons, and illustrations. If you're working with photos or images that have complex textures and gradients, you might be better off using a raster image format, like JPEG or PNG.
Gotcha. So vector graphics are amazing for certain types of designs, but might not be the best choice for others. It's all about using the right tool for the job, right?
Exactly. Each image format has its strengths and weaknesses. Vector graphics excel at scalability and sharpness, while raster graphics are better suited for complex images, with lots of detail and color variations.
Okay, I'm feeling much more confident in my understanding of vector graphics now. I have to admit, when I first heard about Inkscape, I thought it was just for creating simple graphics. Nubian's experience really opened my eyes to its versatility, especially when they talked about using Inkscape for typography. Can you tell me more about how Inkscape handles text and what makes it different from just typing in a regular word processor?
So the cool thing about Inkscape is that it treats text as vector objects. So instead of just typing words on a page, you're actually creating shapes that can be manipulated and transformed in all sorts of ways. You can stretch, bend, curve, and even warp text to create unique typographic designs. It's like having a digital calligraphy set at your fingertips.
That sounds amazing. So I could use Inkscape to create a logo with text that's curved around a circle, or maybe even create a custom font.
Absolutely. The possibilities are pretty much endless. Inkscape gives you a level of control over text that you just don't get in traditional word processors.
I'm seeing how Inkscape could become a serious design powerhouse. Okay, so we've delved into vector graphics and typography. Now I want to get back to Nubian's guide on converting SVG to PNG. We left off with that exciting moment of hitting the export button and watching our PNG file come to life. But let's rewind a bit and talk about those export area options. You mentioned we can choose to export the page, the drawing or the selection. Can you give me some like real-world examples of when I might choose one option over another?
Sure. Let's say you've designed a poster in Inkscape, and you want to share it online as a PNG file. You'd probably want to export the entire page, including any background colors or design elements that extend beyond the main content of your poster.
Okay, so Page is like capturing a screenshot of the whole canvas. When would I choose drawing instead?
Let's say you've designed a logo in Inkscape, and you want to send it to a client as a PNG file. In this case, you wouldn't want to include any extra blank space or background elements. You just want the logo itself. That's when you choose drawing. It exports only the objects you've created in your design, giving you a clean, focused PNG of your artwork.
That's really helpful. So drawing is like extracting the essence of my design without any of the extra stuff. What about selection? When would that option be useful?
Imagine you've created this complex illustration in Inkscape, and you only want to export a specific part of it as a PNG. Maybe you want to isolate a character or a particular design element. That's when selection comes in. You just select the portion of your design you want to export, and Inkscape will create a PNG of just that selection.
Wow, that's super cool. It's like having this digital X-Acto knife, allowing me to precisely extract any portion of my design. Okay, so we've covered the export area options. I feel like I have a much better understanding of when I might choose one over another. Now let's move on to DPI. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Can you remind me why DPI is so important and how it affects the quality of our PNG files?
Okay, DPI is all about the density of dots in an image. The higher the DPI, the more dots packed into each inch, which means a sharper, more detailed image. This is especially important when printing your designs.
Right, so for printing, I'd want to go with a higher DPI, like that 300 that Nubian recommended, to make sure my design looks good when printed.
Exactly. If you're printing something like a business card or a flyer, a DPI of 300 is usually a safe bet. But if you're just sharing your PNG online or using it for web graphics, a lower DPI like 72 is usually fine. Screen resolutions are generally lower than print resolutions.
Good to know. I'll keep that in mind when I'm exporting my PNGs. So we've picked our export area, set our DPI. What happens after we hit that export button?
Before Inkscape creates that PNG file, it needs to know where to save it and what to name it.
Right, like giving our PNG file a home on our computer and a name tag so we can find it later. Any tips on choosing a save location and file name?
Be organized. Create a dedicated folder for your PNG files, or organize them by project. When it comes to naming your files, be descriptive and consistent. Instead of saving a file as like image1.png, give it a name that actually tells you what it is, like logo-final.png or posterdesign-300dpi.png. Trust me, this will save you so much time later on.
That's such a good point. My files are kind of a mess right now. Okay, so we've chosen a save location, given our PNG file a name, and now we're finally ready to hit that export button. What happens next?
Once you click export, Inkscape will go ahead and create your PNG file. You'll see a progress bar, and then you'll have a brand new PNG file ready to go.
It's like our design is graduating from the editing stage to the ready to share stage.
Exactly.
And from there, the possibilities are endless.
You got it.
You can upload it to your website, share it on social media, use it in a presentation, or even print it out.
For sure.
It's so empowering, taking an idea from concept to a real digital asset that we can share, all thanks to Inkscape and this SVG to PNG conversion process. Speaking of empowering, I want to come back to the idea that Inkscape is more than just a design tool. It's a gateway to a whole new world of creative expression, and it's driven by this community of passionate people who are so generous with their knowledge and support.
I agree. It's really inspiring to see how Inkscape is making design accessible to everyone, regardless of their budget or technical skills. And the community is a huge part of that.
It's like Inkscape is not just a piece of software, but like a movement, a new way of thinking about design and collaboration.
I like that.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from vector graphics to converting SVG to PNG. And we've even explored the Inkscape community. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on why Inkscape is such a valuable tool, especially for beginners who are just starting out.
Well, Inkscape is more than just a free alternative to expensive design software. It's a powerful tool with a ton of features and an amazing community. But what really makes Inkscape special is how accessible it is. It's easy to learn. And the fact that it's free opens up so many doors. Anyone can dive into the world of design with Inkscape.
That's awesome. It's like Inkscape is saying, Hey, you don't need fancy software to be creative. Just jump in and start creating. Okay, I think we've officially covered everything we wanted to in this deep dive. We've explored Inkscape's features, we have explained how to convert SVG to PNG, and we've talked about the amazing Inkscape community. But before we go, I have one final question for you and for our listeners.
Okay, shoot.
Now that you've learned about Inkscape and how to convert SVG to PNG, what creative project will you tackle first?
Ooh, what a great question. There are so many possibilities. You could design a logo for your dream business, create custom illustrations for your blog, or even design and print your own greeting cards. The only limit is your imagination.
So true. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. The Inkscape community is there to support you. So dive in, explore, experiment, and most importantly, have fun. That's a great challenge. What creative project will you tackle first?
I love that you frame this whole Inkscape thing as an invitation to just explore and create. Like, you don't have to be an expert. It's more about taking that first step and having fun along the way. I think that's the best part. Inkscape takes away those barriers that can stop people from getting creative. You don't need to spend a ton of money or feel overwhelmed by complicated tools. Just jump in and start playing around.
You know what else is really cool about Inkscape? Nubian mentioned it in their post, but we haven't talked about it yet. Inkscape is open source software. Can you explain what that means and why it's such a big deal?
Okay, so open source software means the code that makes the program work is available to everyone. Anyone can see it, change it, even distribute their own versions of it.
That's wild. So it's not just about using the software, it's about understanding it, adapting it, and even contributing to its development.
Exactly. With Inkscape, you're not just a user. You're part of a global community that's constantly working to make it better.
It's like this giant collaborative art project
Right.
where everyone can bring their skills and ideas to the table.
I love that analogy. And because it's open source, Inkscape is always evolving. People
Yes.
are adding new features, fixing bugs, and making it more powerful and user-friendly.
All thanks to contributions from passionate people all over the world.
It's a global effort, for sure, driven by a love of design and a belief in the power of collaboration.
This makes me think about the bigger picture of open source. It's not just about making great tools like Inkscape, it's about a new way of thinking about knowledge, breaking down barriers and letting people participate in the process.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we can do so much more when we work together and share what we know.
I love that. It's such a powerful message, especially in a world that can feel so divided. Open source reminds us that we can achieve more when we collaborate and support each other.
It's about building a world where everyone has a chance to create, learn, and grow.
And Inkscape is a perfect example. It's a tool that's powerful and accessible, all thanks to its open source nature and the community behind it.
Yeah, Nubian's story really shows the power of Inkscape and the whole open source movement. They wanted to try digital design and ended up creating something amazing.
Yeah.
Connecting with a global community.
It's so inspiring to see how one person's journey can ripple out and inspire so many others.
And it all started with a free download and a willingness to learn.
To anyone listening who's even a little bit curious about Inkscape, I say go for it. Download it, play around, and see what you can create. You might be surprised by what you discover.
You really might.
And with that, my friend, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Inkscape. We've explored its features, learned how to convert SVG to PNG, and talked about its awesome community.
It's been a great journey, filled with so much inspiration.
I hope you're feeling inspired to start your own Inkscape adventure. Remember, there are no limits.
Just your imagination.
So go create something amazing and share it with the world. The Inkscape community is waiting for you.
Happy designing, everyone.
Until next time, keep diving deep into the world of knowledge and creativity.